Well, I really love living in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, but we all have to come from somewhere. And I claim Austin, Texas is my hometown. Now, one of the things Austin's known for is its uniqueness. Now, Texas as a whole is rightfully understood as a socially conservative kind of place, but Austin's known for being more bohemian, more laid back. It's the home of intellectuals and musicians and hippies and nonconformist. So much so, there's even a saying about Austin you can find on t-shirts and coffee mugs and bumper stickers. Keep Austin weird. And by weird, that can mean many things, but mostly I think it means it's a place that's truly unique and open-minded and doesn't take itself too seriously. Now, weird's not exactly a word any chamber of commerce would want to put on a billboard, but the funny thing is that very identity of uniqueness has been the thing that's helped make Austin one of the fastest growing cities in America. When my family moved there in the early 1970s, the population was around 300,000. Now it's 2.2 million. So you have to ask, why would so many people be drawn to a place that's known as weird or unique? Well, it's complicated, but it holds up to the theory that being different, being creative, not following the herd, being authentic, and going beyond expectations of what's normal is something that we need and that a lot of other people are drawn to. When the Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome, he was addressing something that's not unusual in any church. In fact, it's not unusual in any organization, whether it's a church or a fire department or a factory that's making ice cream, which, if you think of it, that'd be such an awesome place to work. Whoops, darn. This half-gallon of salted caramel with vanilla just got damaged. Well, we can't let it go to waste, can we? Anyway, in a healthy organization, the focus is on their common cause, their reason for being, their purpose. Now, not every person in the organization plays the same role in pursuing that cause, but the cause, the reason they exist, is clearly defined. Sometimes that unity of purpose can get lost in the mix of all the personalities who work there, who volunteer there. You can have clearly defined job descriptions and HR policies, but people can still get upset with each other over small things, or if they believe they're not being appreciated, or if they're working harder than the guy further down the ice cream production line who's still got a raise anyway. Well, apparently that kind of thing was happening at the church in Rome. Folks were paying more attention to each other and pointing out their faults and losing their focus on the reason that they existed in the first place. Maybe they weren't getting their way, so they were complaining. So Paul tells them this: don't be conformed to the ways of the world. And by that he apparently means stop behaving like normal people who don't know any better and start paying attention to what really matters most. Grow up, be your own self, and focus on the goal that you have in common. Now, for them in the earliest days of the church, that meant being a very unique collection of people. People who were known for their charity and good works and compassion. In ancient Rome, there were occasional plagues. Sound familiar? While much of the population locked their doors or just headed for the hills, the local Christians were known for risking their own lives by staying in the city, going into the streets and alleyways, and taking care of the sick and dying. As a small movement, they behaved in subtle but significant ways that made a positive difference. It wasn't so much what they said they believed, it was what they actually did. They gave themselves away in love. Now, a lot of people thought those Christians were really weird for doing that. But loving their neighbor was their focus, their cause, their whole purpose. It wasn't about their needs. It was about serving the needs of others. And that got people's attention. It drew more and more people to them. And before long, they were not such a small movement anymore. Over the next several weeks, every so often, I'd like to talk about who we are as a church, why we're doing what we're doing. I think it's good to take a look at that periodically to help us define our reason for being, our focus, our cause. And for those of you watching who are not Salem members, hang in there. because wherever you are, I think you'll want to hear this. Now, Salem has a nice long history, so it's really helpful to think about the larger social context of that history. What was happening in the world and in this community during Salem's lifespan thus far? Going back all the way to 1861 when Salem was first founded, that would be a lot of ground to cover. So it's probably a better idea to take a look at a smaller period of time. So let's say the last 30 years or so. Now, one thing that's absolutely true is that every generation believes that its particular moment in history is unique, that no one's ever seen such rapid change before. But in the past 30 years, that change has come at an exponential rate. In 1990, I would have never dreamed that we'd be doing something called a live stream service on something called the internet, and that I can order my favorite brand of tea online later this morning, and it'll show up at my door tomorrow afternoon. It's crazy. Also, in 1990, we could safely assume that the vast majority of Americans identified themselves as being Christian. And we'd be right. It was about 85% of Americans. But that's no longer the case. Today, only about 65% of Americans claim to be some form of Christian. And out of that 65% who still claim to be Christian, only 54% of those folks, over half, attend church once or twice a year. Those are the nice people we see every Christmas and Easter. Meanwhile, the number of people who say that they're atheist, agnostic, or just nothing in particular, that now stands at 26%, and that number is growing. Now, there is some correlation between a person's age and the likelihood that they go to church or consider themselves to be Christian. 84% of the people born between 1928 and 1945 say that, and about 3/4 of baby boomers. But only half of millennials, people between the ages of 23 and 39, only half of them describe themselves as Christians. And even out of those, less than a third ever go to church at all. The other half of millennials claim no religious affiliation whatsoever. That is 166 million people. Sorry about all the statistics, but those numbers tell us a story. Now, if you're a regular churchgoer, and those facts and figures sound the least bit distressing, it's easy to blame our culture, and I've heard it all. We've become morally lax. We've let kids play soccer on Sundays instead of reserving that time for church. There are just too many distractions, too many other options, or the parents, they're the ones to blame. I think blaming the culture or anything else is absolutely lame because it allows us to avoid any responsibility. What's rarely done is for any church to take a long, hard look at itself and ask what I think is the real question. What if we're to blame? What if we become so normal, believing that what matters most are our cherished traditions and rituals and ways of being organized, and so focused on our self-preservation that we have lost our focus and our purpose and our cause? When you ask someone why they don't go to church or why they don't necessarily identify as a Christian, and I do ask people that question all the time, the responses usually go something like this. Churches are full of hypocrites and closed-minded people. Or, churches only serve themselves. They're about taking money to maintain their church building instead of helping others. Or, I just can't buy into all those beliefs. I believe there's a God, but I don't believe God plays favorites. Or, the church condemns gay people, and I think that's stupid. Or, I think God's bigger than any one religion. Who's to say there's only one right belief system? Or, I'm not welcome at church. I feel like an outsider. Or, church is all about guilt and shame, and you're going to hell and making sure you go to heaven. Isn't there more to life than that? Or, church just isn't relevant to my life. The services are boring. The music, no. Or, there's so many problems in the world, but churches just ignore them. Or, I'm a spiritual person, but I don't want to be told I can't think for myself. Or, well, some combination of all the above. You get the idea. Now, when I was listing those reasons I've personally been told by people who don't go to church, did you picture someone relatively young, perhaps a millennial? It's true that I have heard those things from millennials, but believe it or not, most of those comments, they come from baby boomers like me and a lot of older adults too. So this is not about someone's age. It goes far beyond that. If we're honest, we have all heard those comments, probably from our own family members. Some of us who are still involved in church have likely said those things ourselves, but we've been afraid to say it out loud. But what have we done about it? Have we looked deeply at what the church has been doing the past few decades and is doing today and asked, are those really valid criticisms? I think they're absolutely valid. We are guilty as charged. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. If you're deeply invested in the way the church always has been, even if you've witnessed the declining numbers of people showing up, it's a huge challenge to seriously consider that maybe we've been more about preserving what's normal, and even going so far to make what's normal an object of worship in itself when we're really here to worship God. When our reason for being, our purpose, our cause, and our calling is to be unique, to be nonconformist, to be intentionally focused on serving and loving our neighbors, to be laser focused on real life issues that matter to people, to be outrageously hospitable and welcoming of anyone and everyone who's seeking a supportive, loving community, to be vulnerable and authentic and admit that we are struggling just like everyone else to figure life out. To never claim to know it all, but to always say, hey, why don't we just take this journey together and explore? To challenge the forces of injustice, bigotry, and greed, like Jesus did every day of his life. And to make the bold, positive claim that God is real because I see God in you. And it's okay to differ on the details because what matters to God is not who's right or who's wrong, but how much we love our neighbors and each other. If we do that, if we stay in the city and care for those who are hurting while everyone else locks their doors or heads for the hills, if we take the risk of loving without limits, if we walk our talk, if our cause is to serve those who believe there is no place for them here, or there's no relevance for them here, by proving there is indeed a place at the table for you, because your life matters greatly to me, and you are beloved, no matter who you are or where you've been. If that is our singular purpose, then we will create a whole new definition of church. Of course, the truth is, that's just the original definition of church. Nonconformist, unique. Some might call it weird. You know what I call it? Christian.